topic today is going to be what are the characteristics of a mature startup ecosystem. So, well, before we kick off or dive deep into the topic, maybe we can hear from our guest a bit of introduction of themselves. Jeffrey or David, who wants to go first?
Jeffrey, you go first.
Okay. Hi. Okay, I'll go first. My name is Jeffrey. I'm originally from Sarawak. Just in case those of you are interested, born and raised in Cebu. Spent a substantial amount of time in New Zealand as well as in Taiwan. Did a lot of startup stuff when I was in Taiwan, and now I'm back in New Zealand. I'm still doing quite a substantial amount of startup stuff over here, not just with startups, but also in relation to the ecosystem here, to some extent. Personally, I was professionally trained as a lawyer. I decided that I needed a better, I needed something else in my life. So I decided to. Well, it was somewhat of an accidental embarking on this new journey, the startup journey. Basically, just found myself to like the environment of, in a sense of not being in a comfort zone for too long, because when you're in the startup world, you don't stay in a comfort zone all the time. You are always trying to push the limit, push the boundary. Not that I like it all that much, because it's not easy. It's not an easy lifestyle. But then again, this is what gets me going, articulates my mind, so much. It stimulates my mind so much better. So this is where I am for the last 10 years, all startup related stuff. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for a brief introduction. David, your turn.
Hi, I'm David Kuo. I'm the founder and CEO of Eno, which is a startup launchpad helping international startup using Taipei as an ecosystem to launch to Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, and India. And I'm also very fortunate to be involved in some of the amazing global startup programs, such as Startup Grind, Startup Weekend, and also Gen Global, which is really focused on ecosystem and policy making. So I think we're going to share some of the thing and the lesson learned, and looking forward to today's discussion.
All right, thank you, David. So, just to keep everyone a little bit on track, or maybe on the same page of what we are going to talk about today. So, can in your context, right? What is a startup ecosystem? Any one of you can take this question, like, just because there's a lot of definition out there on startup ecosystem, right? So, what is your definition of startup ecosystem?
David?
Well, I actually been giving this ecosystem presentation to different governments in Asia. So I use the Wikipedia definition, which is a group of people, working together positively in helping startup to thrive. So it could be startup, it could be service provider, it could be policymaker, anybody who is involved working together, collaborating to help the startup in your city or country or region to thrive. So this way of working is called ecosystem.
Right. Well, the name suggests, itself that, what it means. Ecosystem means that it's not just you alone. You have a lot of other stakeholders. They are coexisting with you. So we're talking about in terms of like when you do a startup, or if you're not from a startup perspective, you are actually a government official, or you are one of the organizations that helps build startups or cultivate startups. We just have to realize that there's a lot of other players. They are within the same ecosystem. Each of them will have their own agenda, their own interests they're taking care of. So the startup ecosystem has so many things going on. That's what makes it fascinating, because it's not just you doing a product and then finding customers and that's it. No, it's actually a whole lot more involved. So we're talking about government, and then you can talk with else. We are also talking about intergovernments, So there are different levels of looking at the ecosystem itself. And so basically, I would say that there's a lot of it's a lot of stakeholders within the startup world. all interacting with one another, in different ways.
Right. So since that both of you are from different cities or country, Jeffrey, you used to live in Taiwan for a few years, right? And maybe let's start off with Jeffrey. 12 years. Wow. I always thought it's only 5 years.
No.
Wow, that's a long time. So since Jeffrey is on the line now, and we would like to know about like what would be the would you able to share a little bit on the startup ecosystem in New Zealand, because now you are based in New Zealand, right? So are you able to share on that startup ecosystem in New Zealand? And after that, we want to hear it out from David on Taiwan startup ecosystem.
Right. Okay. Not a problem. I don't want to profess that I know everything about the ecosystem here in New Zealand, because I've only been back here January of last year. Okay, so I've only been back for more than a year. I was fortunate enough to be involved in an accelerator program, so they got me the access to a lot of these ecosystem players, and they got to understand what's happening in New Zealand. But then again, I still want to say that there's a whole lot of things I'm still learning. But in terms of what to expect, New Zealand itself, the country has just reached 5 million population as a matter of last week. And so the government just finally announced, hey, we finally reached 5 million population. So it's a relatively small size country. But then again, it's a very mature economy. In terms of export earners, we're talking about tourism industry being the largest one since 2017. Used to be dairy products, meat products, but now it's tourism. Obviously, because of the pandemic, so it's very much affected by the pandemic, like the rest of us in other parts of the world. But if you look at the industry itself, there's this tourism, there's dairy products, which is a lot of people that that's how people got to know this one to be about. But it also has its tech sector. The best way I would put it is that imagine that your country will have a lot of internet companies or software companies, and then some of them actually become listed companies because of their success in how they build your the business. New Zealand has been fortunate to have and this is, I don't know how many there are, but there's definitely one internet company that has been listed on New Zealand Stock Exchange. So compared to other countries, I always like to make this comparison. Look at what you have in your country. Do you have at least a company that is actually built itself to from as a software company or internet company from the very beginning? There's actually not a lot of countries that can actually make that claim. Okay, so New Zealand, despite its small size, it has actually been able to produce companies that are actually just internet based, completely pure internet company or pure software company. And so just because people think that okay, you're all about agriculture, you're all about travel tourism, that's not the case. Even with respect to the investment scene, a lot of the VC here actually will prefer to invest in enterprise SaaS vertical than other verticals by comparison. So that is also showing that there's a shift in terms of the focus mindset, and also in terms of the market, how they scale some of the businesses successfully. So this is what's unique about New Zealand. It obviously, because of the small size, a lot of entrepreneurs here, when they start a business, they will always look beyond their border and not just look at their own local market, because 5 million is probably not enough to build a company that can go IPO, right? So you need a larger market size. So New Zealand has, most of the entrepreneurs will know that eventually they need to go to Australia, eventually they need to go to US and the UK. And so this is the situation here. But obviously, compared to some of the ecosystem vibrancy, like the ones in Singapore, the one in maybe Beijing or even Silicon Valley, New Zealand ones obviously is not as comparable, but just because it's not comparable doesn't mean that there's no good things coming out of New Zealand. So obviously there's a lot of things I can talk about, but if anyone wants to go into some final details, more than happy to elaborate.
Oh, okay. So David.
Yeah. So I think Jeffrey's having him spending in Taiwan for more than 12 years, he can also add in. So I will use a slightly different way of describing, and then Jeffrey can add on. So Taiwan has about 23, 24 million people. And then in Taipei alone, it has roughly estimated 3 million to living actually in Taipei and 3 million abroad from the near city region. So it's totally about 6 million people working. So Taiwan is actually a good testing market for Chinese speaking or Chinese culture driven. And then it's a very unique ecosystem and market. I would say that Taiwan is small enough for you to do test market, but big enough for you to do lesson learns and also doing manufacturing R&D for others. So I will go into 3 different aspects. One is startups. So we have actually a vibrant startup, not saying that we are going to have unicorn, because right now this word has been widely used, but we do have some prospects such as Appear, Gogoro, M17, and some are B2B model, some are B2C model, are actually globally focused. And then the second thing, if you look at funding, I'm very proud to say that Taiwan, everybody has working very hard. So right now, it's actually very easy to get seed fund or angel fund. If you're not looking at big ticket, let's say like 100K or 200K US dollar for your seed or for your, and you can basically are some active investors. They are maybe lawyers, accountants, insurance entrepreneurs just had an exit. So we do have that people, and we also have like a lot of VC right now are doing pre-A. So lately last year we also have the NDC ministry actually have a matching fund. So if you're raising under 100K, they basically will match without you needing to go through the government investment commission. Basically, they have listed people who they will co-invest. So for example, us and a lot of accelerator are actually under this green fast lane investments. So the ratio could be 1-to-1, 1-to-2. So that's the funding. Number 3 is actually government. Taiwan is very unique, and that's the beauty of Taiwan. We actually have 15 ministry, over 48 government projects focused on different stages of entrepreneurship. Some are focused on idea stage, some are focused on inbound or outbound. And Taiwan's on the policy, we're actually forefront. We are the second country that launched startup visa in Asia after Japan, and actually Thailand followed, and I believe Southern Australia actually launched their version as well. And it's very unique. And I will always say that Taiwan is 1/3 very Japanese, 1/3 very US, and 1/3 our own. So it's definitely a very good place if you want to do gaming. Actually, Android consuming market, actually Taiwan consumer ranked top 5 in terms of spending. If you want to do a bit more traditionally like whiskey, Taiwan is actually the top 3, whiskey consumption in the world. Imagine that. So there's a lot of things that Taiwan can offer beyond just high tech or semiconductor. Actually, I think a lot of teams right now that we help with from Singapore and Hong Kong look at Taiwan not only as a testing market, but as a second location to build in R&D.
Nice. Wow, that is very insightful from both of you, from New Zealand and Taiwan. So I think anyone who's listening to us now, I think they can look into a different perspective of like in terms of if they were to scale their business or anything, they can actually look into tapping into New Zealand and also Taipei or Taiwan, right? So so let's I mean that's very good information for everyone to have an idea of New Zealand and Taiwan. So the next question that we have is that who would you think the best to be a startup ecosystem builder? I mean, besides all the startup founders or any individual or community builders, but who do you think would be best to be a startup ecosystem builder? I mean, this is pretty much, I think uh, it's very open as well. There's no specific answer to that, but what would be your opinion?
What can I jump on that? I would personally think
Yeah.
Malcolm Jeffrey is a great example of ecosystem builder. So we can start from there.
Right.
Jeffrey, you want to take
Uh,
on this?
I mean, I think you and I, David and I we talked about, how do we actually define startup ecosystem, ecosystem builder, just literally several weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that we can actually put a very good definition on it. Just like it's difficult to define what's a dad, what's a husband, what's a wife. So it can be so many things to so many people. It really depends on your circumstances. And so, obviously, if you're in Silicon Valley, the ecosystem there is so much more mature. And so, to claim yourself to be an ecosystem builder, you obviously need to know a whole lot more and do a whole lot more before you can actually, really say that, hey, I'm an ecosystem builder. But then again, is that the right definition to go by? And just because you don't know as much, you haven't done as much, just does that make you not an ecosystem builder? So I think it's a case of mindset more so than what you've actually accomplished. For me, if someone is really passionate about connecting all the different dots, like getting all the different stakeholders coming together to play this wonderful game and to play a good game. There shouldn't be any. It shouldn't be about winning and losing. It should be about everyone enjoying, the process, being part of it. Knowing that there's actually a bigger synergy to be created. There's actually something positive outcome to be expected. And so anyone that has that kind of mindset, anyone that works towards that end goal, I think if the person calls himself, herself an ecosystem builder, I will not object to that. But obviously, you can't just claim it and do nothing. A lot of people have said that they're ecosystem builder, but they, if you don't know what you're doing, then that's okay. But if you're not doing enough, then obviously that title is a bit overrated.
Yeah.
Right, right. Anything to add on, David?
Yeah, I totally, agree with Jeffrey. It's a more mindset. So one of the initiatives that I'm involved with is actually called Gen Global Entrepreneurship Network, and they have a very defined definition. It needs to be embrace two core value, which is inclusive, meaning that you entertain the possibility of the impossible. Anything that popping out your ecosystem is trying to do good, you open welcome. You don't use your previous knowledge or mindset to make a judgment. So if you're inclusive, you're basically people, will more likely to be more empathy and more like, to more welcome and positive. So that's the first, being inclusive. You even need to learn how to hug your competitor. And that's something that I'm learning and the mistake I made before. And the second thing is priority. If you really truly call yourself as the Taiwan or the APEC ecosystem, are you able to put the priority of this ecosystem over your own initiative? Because most likely there's going to be a conflict of interest. That said, your day job is working for a semi-government agency, and your job is to shine in Techstar or in CES. Do you actually at your bandwidth able to help startup in other country? In some government agency, it's not actually encouraged, but in some government agency, if they have really the growth mindset and the ability to embrace other, they actually will actually do a joint effort. So that's where it gets tricky. It's not actually what you do, is how do you start? How do you use your own platform to help the building the maturity of your own ecosystem and also helping out the ecosystem of your neighboring or in your region?
Right.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think there is obviously, if you belong to an organization that helps startups, you do your job, and then because of your understanding of the ecosystem, you do something that actually is beyond what is required of your job. Then that someone to me is helping to build the ecosystem, right? Because you know that if you do more, there's actually more benefit to the ecosystem, like to one startup, to 10 startups, or to another accelerator programs, or those that are involved in the program, or even to the general public. I think it's a case of like the broader view, right? You look at, it may not be something that you talk about all day long, but at the back of your mind, you understand that you're doing this for the greater good. Okay, so it's not just, hey, I've done my job, that's it, right? Then you're just doing your job. You're not actually helping the ecosystem to become something bigger and better.
Right. Wow, thank you for those amazing insights from both of you. So moving on, the next question would be like, we may have some founders in the room here, and or maybe some policymakers in the room as well. Since the both of you are quite resourceful, or quite um, being in the ecosystem for quite some time, for Taiwan and New Zealand as well, would you be able to share a bit on like what are the kind of the ecosystem onboarding, on some of the pitfalls of a mature ecosystem, and basically how have you all been reinventing for Taiwan and New Zealand as well, in terms of the ecosystem?
I will start sharing. I think about if we really look at the Taiwan ecosystem, I think we can backdate it to about year 2010 or 11. That's where Apple launches. That's where Business Next, the big media, organize events. That's where a lot of government have their own thing. So if we're really looking at that, not saying that things didn't happen in year 2010, but a lot of things starting from year 2010. So I think Taiwan has definitely going to different stages. I think the stage one is to uh, buy the initiative, licensing from others, right? So I think we always at that time think about how do we mimic the Silicon Valley. And I see a lot of governments that are advised to, such as Japan, Fukuoka, and Okinawa. They also went through the same thing in stage one. But if you look at Singapore and other, like other great ecosystem, they actually grow their own, right? Of course, they also make a. So I would think about Singapore as, they're in the stage two, which is they really homegrown their version. And I think the Block 71 initiative now is even moved to stage three, which is they are able to export their playbook to other neighboring, right? So if you really look at that, I don't think it's really a pitfall, but rather a lesson learned from different stages. So I think the first one is don't mimic. I think learning is starting mimic, but mimicking is a good way for you to get that first step. But when you are doing the second, third step, you need to quickly move to the stage two, which is homegrown, what best work for you, instead of just take that playbook and try to smash it. Definitely Taiwan has understood, Jeffrey, you're the expert on this one. But I think right now, even for Taiwan and our neighboring countries such as Japan, they are really looking at what works in terms of stage two. So in Taiwan, actually the Minister of Education is revamping their startup education university. Minister of Science and Technology is actually rolling out different program, and they're also fading out some of the stage one type of program. So I think the lesson learned is don't just take whatever works from abroad and copy it. So Jeffrey, do you have any lesson learned or pitfalls?
Oh yeah. I can identify with what David just mentioned, because when I first started my startup events in Taiwan, so I had to talk a little bit about Taiwan. That was 2011. Okay, so just 1 year after what the 2010 that David just mentioned. So we both of us, I know David for like 10 years. So both more than, if not more than 10 years. So both of us actually witnessed how the startup ecosystem have actually gradually evolved from not a lot of things to look forward to now there's so many things happening in the ecosystem. So its vibrancy shows that that there's a lot of different elements interacting with one another, and that's what makes you excited about the ecosystem, because wow, there's so many things happening, right? Every night there's always a few dozen things happening in Taipei, right? Can't say the same for all the other cities in Taiwan, but definitely in Taipei there's so many things happening. So that actually gives you but bear in mind that it has come a long way arrive at where it is right now, right? When I say, we witnessed it, we did saw how, the changes were, and then to arrive at what it is right now. It certainly has adopted quite a lot of things, like just copy and paste it. But a lot of them eventually found out that, hey, these did not really work that well. So maybe we can evolve a bit to something else. It really depends on how experienced you are to be able to pinpoint that, hey, we need to pivot. There's a term that we use in the startup world. Obviously, I hope all of you will understand it, what that means. A lot of them would pivot much faster. A lot of them took a while for them to really find the right direction. But either way, like I said, sorry, like David said, it shouldn't be just copying and pasting. You can learn. You can probably look at what some other people have done and then try to maybe adapt what you've seen to your situation, because everyone definitely has their own different situation, right? The situation in Malaysia is probably is definitely very different from the situation in New Zealand. So the situation in New Zealand is definitely very different from the situation in Fiji, which is not far away from New Zealand, but with much smaller population size. So you can't do the same thing in Malaysia and then expect it to be successful in New Zealand or in Fiji, right? Even the ones in China, in US, they are at a much faster pace. So I would think that the best thing to do is, yes, we can learn, but then we need to adapt, okay, according to the situation of your local ecosystem. So in the case of New Zealand, we only have 5 million population. We can't possibly try to do everything, right? We can't possibly say one day, hey, we want to go into hardware manufacturing. That's not something New Zealand is gonna be ever, like excelled better than the rest of the world. Certainly, it doesn't happen overnight. It won't happen overnight. And so it has to find its strength, and then it has to identify its weaknesses, and then also the opportunities that are there, and then try to tap into the opportunities, and then build on top of that. And so New Zealand has a lot of these positive things that it has accumulated over the last few decades, the last century, because New Zealand hasn't been around for that long. And so like the things like, obviously agriculture has been a New Zealand thing for so long. So maybe agri-tech can be a thing. Food tech can definitely be a thing here. The other thing we can talk about is New Zealand being an English-speaking country, right? So it's such a small population size. Maybe you can come here and try something out. And like, just borrowing the same terminology that David has used, treat New Zealand as a test market before you enter the larger English-speaking markets, right? The likes of US, UK. New Zealand is great for that. Why not treat New Zealand as that, right? So you have to, and then from New Zealand perspective, they can actually sell themselves as that, right? Because we want to be innovative, because innovation comes with it with a lot of great, goodness. But how do we sell to the rest of the world about our ecosystem? Like what can we offer, right? So you cannot just offer them, hey, we have all this dairy product and all this meat product, great place to travel. That's all good, but what else can you do? And this is how you identify your strength. This is how you identify something that you can also build, and then from there, evolve slowly. And then I don't want to say reinvent yourself, because it's not something new, because the ones that really are inventing new ways of doing things are probably in places like Silicon Valley, or in I don't know about Beijing, but maybe to some extent in Beijing, or in Hangzhou, or even Singapore. But I would say, like in your own cases, you may not be if you have all the resources, obviously reinvent. But if you don't have that resources, focus on certain verticals, and then try to excel in them. Yeah.
Right.
And I just want to briefly, I certainly made those mistakes, especially, also working with the governments. I think when you're talking about implementing initiatives or prevention programs, any angles, you don't need to be the first. And then you don't necessarily need to be number one. And I think it took me, that was one of the pitfalls, It's like in the corporate world, you're always trying to beat out your competitor. But in the startup world, everybody, is doing something that is like doesn't have precedence. So I think embracing, we don't need to copy Silicon Valley, but there's definitely some mindsets such as giving back, such as collaboration, such as open innovation. Those are not something that I think Asians or people in this, APAC region, we have taught when we're little. When we're talking little is beat the crap out of your competitor. That's what I learned. And especially, in Taiwan manufacturing, right? It's always, we're gonna do it cheaper and more CPU. So we're looking at doing cheaperly, but I think right now the pitfall we're seeing is we're using the corporate teaching and trying to use these skill sets in building, such as you got to outcompete. It's a zero-sum game. Is a finite game, and I think Taiwan is definitely right now in the second stage. Is we are learning how to collaborate. We don't necessarily need to be number one. We can actually be complementary. We could be, that, little, nuts and screw that, build the amazing space shuttle, to Mars. So I think it's definitely a different mindset. So I think the pitfall is don't think to outcompete, don't think to be number one, and don't need to be first. You can start with complementary. You can start meaning helping other, beat that bottom nuts, and I think that will work well.
Wow.
I think I agree with what David said. Sorry, I have to say a little bit more.
Oh, please.
I think the different ecosystem, if you identify opportunities and your weaknesses, there's a chance that different ecosystem, because they're complementary to one another, they can actually work together. There's no need for you to build everything by yourself. Like perhaps Singapore and Taiwan can work together, because Taiwan is great in building stuff, and Singapore has been known to, like very business minded, and they can sell all over the world. Is there a chance that the two can collaborate? Even in the case of New Zealand, maybe Taiwan and New Zealand can collaborate, because New Zealand is much closer to a lot of the English-speaking countries, because a lot of people have actually treaded this pathway, and so they have this experience accumulated.
Right.
Yes,
So with what you both have sort of sharing the same common context in terms of like collaboration. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to adapt as well, not to reinvent but adapt or localize it, right? Have references. So what would be your view about mentoring within the startup ecosystem? I mean, as we know, mentoring can also derail the initial plans of startup founders, particularly in the context of Asia, where the kowtow sentiment is still pretty strong, right? So what would be the view from the both of you?
Okay, I'll go first. I think mentors are very important to the journey, to the startup journey. I think it's way more important than, in a sense, more important than the investors, as well as I'm not saying it's definitely not more important than your team. Your team is everything that you have. You should build your team well, but then again, next to your team, who else can you get to really bring you to the next game level? I think mentors can play that role. A lot of times, startups are bound by their own blind spots, and you needed someone else to be a sounding board. You don't really need someone to tell you what to do, right? But because if you really are entrepreneur, if you are really problem solving, you just needed someone else to verify that, hey, I'm on the right track, right? So this is something that I have personal experience with this government program that I helped run in Taiwan, and also last year I was involved in this accelerator program. Both of them, we are very mentorship heavy, okay? Because we know that this is how startup and the founders will learn in a quicker manner. We're not trying to teach them all these principles, because teaching, you can't, to some extent, you can't really teach entrepreneurship, but you can actually learn quite a lot from someone else's experience. So in terms of mentors, obviously you need to find the right mentors. Not just anyone can be the mentor. It shouldn't be an academic, discussion. It should be like, hey, this is what I've done. What's your experience? Do you have the relevant experience? You can tell me, right? So we can, compare notes. And so this is how, startups can learn quicker and grow faster.
Yeah.
So yeah, mentorship is very important.
No, I agree. Mentors is from different aspect. One of the mentors' key job is to provide clarity. Even mentors has mentor. I mentor team. If I sometime I reach out to my mentor to see if I blind spot. So that's what the number one or the key is. Provide clarity. In terms of the ecosystem maturity, if you can develop a program where you're doing group mentoring, it's not only beneficial to the team. Actually, mentor can learn from each other, and a lot of great things are coming out of the conversation. So I think mentor provides, they have a very complete different perspective than consultant and coaches. Not saying that one is better than the other, but during your startup, you're often, are there trying to validate your business or create something that doesn't exist. So clarity, I think, sometimes comes very important, and definitely experience counts, but the possibility of entertaining the impossible is also needed. So when you're doing mentoring, sometimes you got to keep your past experience as a good foundation, but shouldn't be the boundary. We see a lot of young mentor, and also I made that mistake is try to impose what you think, what you know to the startup, and that's why we see a lot of fallout between mentor and startup team. And there's another thing is, sometimes young entrepreneur expect free mentorship. I also tell a lot of a startup that free is the most expensive. But if you're already in a government program or accelerator program, it's actually paid for. Oh, sometimes it's not in the sense of monetary, but I think, that's what's the beauty of the ecosystem. At the end, somebody is paying. So I think if you can develop an ecosystem that support sustainable mentorship, and I think that's what reached to that maturity. That's why in the Silicon Valley, a lot of serial entrepreneur become angel investor because that's the way how they pay back. And it's one of the essence of startup grind. Startup grind is all about founders and more experienced founders coming back, given what just happened 12 months ago when they funded or when they were trying to get access to a particular channels. That's what the startup grind platform is based on. That is providing a system or ecosystem playbook for people to be able to give back.
Yeah.
So we have talked about like startup founders. We talk about investors, accelerators, policymakers, and we also talk about touch on government as well, right? So basically, all of everyone does have a role to play in a startup ecosystem building in that particular city or region, right? So how can you how would you think about the an ecosystem growth and also the evolution of the ecosystem as well over time? I mean, is there any reference that you've seen like the past and now and moving forward?
I would take on different stakeholders and then try to provide on what is happening and what is potentially happening. Let's look at the policy makers. These are the researchers, semi-government officials, and actually the person who put the bill in the government, right? So a government official once taught me, goes, David, if you want to see changes, stop whining and complaining, right? You need to be part of that. And a lot of people see, politician and politics are the same. No, it's very different. Politics is a mechanism how government works. Politician, that's another. So I think if you really want to impact on the regulation or policy of your country or your region, be friends with them. You don't need to agree on what they do, but at least, go work with them, share perspectives, and see if you can move that little needle, like 1 centimeters, because it may change. I mean, if you see the legislature, that the legal law or policy being put in Taiwan the past 5 years, it's amazing. Now we have sandbox for fintech, we sandbox for autonomous vehicles. We have, we're the second country rolled out startup visa. We just passed a governing corporate law that, mimicking zero, value stocks, how do you value, technical share. All these just happened in less than 5 years, but it took about 10 or 15 years of foundation building. So if you really want to see what's happening, be part of them, go work with the legislature. And a lot of people say, what is the boundary between civilians and policymakers? I always tell policymakers, do the thing that civilian cannot do. Well, that's changing the law, right? So government should really focus on research, learning from other ecosystems, and do great policy that thrive. And if you can do a policy, work with other ecosystems together, that's amazing. And you see the trend now. And that's what Taiwan recently are doing. We are looking at our neighbors. We're talking to Japan government, Japanese government. We're talking to the Indian government on some of the collaborative. So in about a year or 2 years, you will see that actually a framework or a law or some kind of mechanism being put in place to fast track the collaboration among governments and region. And the only thing, and one of the things that they're able to do is reaching out to people like Malcolm, to people like Jeffrey. We are actually acting as a conduit. So that's the next trend, is government official actually working with ecosystem builder to connect with neighboring ecosystem and put in the policy so that they don't do a policy with assumptions or narrow-minded. Jeffrey, you want to take on?
Right. I just want to understand, is that a question from you, or is that a question from one of the
No,
audience?
it's from me. That
right.
It's from me actually. Yeah.
Right. Because I'm seeing some questions coming through from the audience. So
yeah, the question we will basically address it in the last 15 minutes.
Okay. I think I don't have a lot to add. I think David said it all. I think government can play a lot of roles, but the last thing we want to see government doing is intervening. It should be providing the playground, right? The environment for. So this is in fact, each of us will have a role to play. So the best role that government can play is actually providing, the all that is needed for the ecosystem to thrive, for the startup to thrive, for the investors to thrive. Because each of us will have different needs. So I believe a great ecosystem should have a government that employs a lot of consultation and process, that it will actually listen. It's not just listening to the locals, but also listening to the international players, listening to the neighboring ecosystems, how they've done their stuff. I know that there's a lot of this study trade being organized by government. I think that's great. But then again, obviously, they need to go for purpose. They need to really somewhat know what's going on before you need to sort of know the situation before you can ask the right question. Because otherwise, there's too much assumption being taken with a lot of things that are happening in a lot of different ecosystems. So that is probably not helpful to building the ecosystem. So consultation is something that I would say that something very important. That's something that Taiwan has done quite well. That's also something that New Zealand has done quite well. There's a lot of consultation process going on. Even for example, by the angel groups, angel association in New Zealand, trying to collect all these different details and then present it to the government and tell them, hey, this is what the ecosystem needs and what these are the things they are lacking. So why don't you just to come up with some policy that tailor to all these different needs and the lacks. Yeah. So consultation.
Wow. So we have talked about quite a fair bit of the whole ecosystem, the characteristics, the roles, and also responsibility. We touch on like government, policy making as well. I mean, policy makers as well, which is involving government areas as well. And so now, like what we are going through during this period of time, which is like the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So how can the ecosystem actually provide a robust support in terms of financial assistance for startups to sustain to sustain, especially during this period of time. So what would be the take from the both of you?
I would have thought that startups are supposed to be more agile, are supposed to be more responsive to harsh environments because they have higher survival skills because they've always been, lack of so many resources. They're always short of something, short of a lot of things, not just something. And so for them to be in this situation, like all the pandemics causing a lot of things being shut down, a lot of things being, not being, you can no longer do the same thing. How can you survive? I think startups have the benefit of enjoying some of the technologies that are available nowadays much easier. They have easier access compared to the rest of the general public. So the technology do help because imagine if we are in this same situation, the pandemic situation, 20 years ago, how can any of us survive the lockdown, right? Without Zoom, with what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
People will just have no choice but to sit there and wait. But we do have a choice. And because if you are entrepreneurs, you tend to be more problem solving minded. So you go out there and try to solve problems, not just your problems, but also someone else's problems, right? And you try to build something that is beneficial to others and also to yourself. Usually, you try to solve problems that are obvious, they are immediate to you, and then that will, and so pandemic is now the pain that everyone is feeling. So obviously, whatever that you're building towards mitigating, or for example, the risk of infection, or you're helping the elderly to be able to go out and about, with their daily living, or even help them with pills, right? Like how do they not get infected, but then get the cancer? Because a lot of the elderly people, they do need their pills, their medicines, and so there are so many things you can do. So many things you can not in terms of creating, but in terms of like uh, uh, I don't want to say creating because there's not really whole lot of new things you can create nowadays. Nothing really new. But it's because of the different situations, circumstances you're in, and so you come up with a solution for that solves that particular issue, and so yeah, just so yeah, I think startups can survive better. What surprises me the most is that the bigger organization actually has more problems in terms of surviving this pandemic. Look at all the airlines, the airline companies. They are short of cash, surprisingly, and not that we just need to know about. You can go belly up so quickly. A lot actually have actually filed for bankruptcy. The startups, they have been, a lot of the friends that I know, they're still moving on, and so that's not a miracle, but it's because of the mindset they have. They know where to cut costs. Okay, not the cost of the product, but the cost of doing certain things, becoming more efficient, right? Using technology to do things better, to do things quicker, to do away the needs of having to be there in person. And so there's so many things that we can talk about. So over to you, David.
Yeah. So Malcolm, what was the question? The question, Jeffrey actually touched on a lot of great things about. I just want to comment. I think startup has the resilience to overcome.
Yes.
I believe the question was how much, what are the help or what government
Financial. It's more like what kind of robust support in terms of financial assistance for startups to sustain at this period of time. Like actually, what can the ecosystem provide them?
Okay.
What? Yeah.
So I kind of do agree with Jeffrey. I think Jeffrey, kind of touch upon something, but I'm just going to go out and say it, right? So I think there was a VC was tweeting on Twitter or something. They basically take their portfolio in 3 buckets. The one not going to make it, they're no longer going to put resources. The second one is if they pivot, they give some resources, they're going to thrive. And third is they were not doing at all very good, but because COVID-19, they suddenly jump up, right?
Mm.
That's the reality of entrepreneurship. Hopefully, you're not in bucket one, right? It means that you have enjoyed the sunlight, you drink the juices, and it's a fair play game, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
if you're in the middle, is it really the government job to help you? We're not going to jump into that topic, but certainly Taiwan government has done it. The NDC ministry actually had an emergency package. It's like a preferred share investment, but with a loan concept, meaning that if you survive, you need to pay back with the loan interest. But if you take this money, you bankrupt, that's fine, right? But there's still certain level of accountability. So I'm more on the one that everybody should, do the best they can, and then hopefully you're in bucket number 3 because COVID-19, you found a new business model, you thrive, and that's basically how entrepreneurship works, right?
Yeah.
So back to your question, how much government should do? And
I think the question is not about the government, but it's more of the ecosystem.
Well,
so I think there's a lot of areas that we can touch on, but government may be one of them.
But if you really took it financial, right now everybody's short of cash.
Right.
Investor is not going to invest right now unless you're in bucket number 3.
Right.
He's not going to reach out for loans, right? Accelerator and people ecosystem builder, we're trying to feed our families.
Right.
So you really look at, Jeffrey, correct me if I'm wrong. Right now is probably the toughest time to ask for money, unless you're in bucket number 3, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Yeah, I think the both of you shared quite an amazing insight. I mean, cover all the bases, because ecosystem, or I mean, the startup ecosystem is so wide, right? That how are we going to? There's like earlier on what Jeffrey mentioned. There's no clear line whose role it is, but it's actually it's an inclusivity of everyone, right? So amazing. I really appreciate both of your insights that really cover some of these questions. So the next one would be I think this would be the last part from my side, right? It's very much like knowing a big players still control most of the business in Malaysia. All right. Can each of you provide one tip to thrive in such an ecosystem? I mean, this is the last question to wrap up everything. So then we will then go into the other questions that our audience have actually put into the Q&A box.
So you're talking about ecosystem dominated by a lot of these big conglomerates.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So how can startups survive?
Yeah, so it's like there's a lot of big players in Malaysia, right? So what are the one tip that you guys were able to provide in order for the startups to thrive in such ecosystem?
Okay. I have one.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Well, not just in Malaysia. I think even in Taiwan, right? If you really truly look at Taiwan's economy, it's controlled by these 10 or 20 big families, or the rest are small and medium. Taiwan, actually, in Taiwan, 95% company are actually small and mediums, right? So a lot of families get their own shop. But if you're really looking at the vibrant, the moving and the shakers, these are these families, right? So I always give, even including ourselves, is in Taiwan, there's this famous saying, is you need to succeed outside of Taiwan first before really truly succeed in Taiwan. Taiwan have this, giving you tremendous respect if you made it somewhere else, right? So maybe in Taiwan right now, you're under a lot of, radar. You're on the radar zone. Everybody's watching you with magnifying glasses. So sometimes it's hard to maneuver, and your competitor is taking out information. So go to another market. And you know why it's important? Because you become a great resources to that new market, not just your business model, but you're actually an ambassador if you do it well. connecting to ecosystems. So you actually will benefit with their inbound, initiatives, and you get a lot of welcomes. And it's same thing. Our first official government consulting project was actually the Japanese Fukuoka government. They hired us to look at their ecosystem, their outbound initiatives, and we rolled out 3 initiatives in Taiwan. And having that credential basically help us to access different projects with government in Thailand, with the 8 Hong Kong, and even in Taiwan. So that worked for us, and that worked for the startup that we invested. So Jeffrey?
Yeah, it's, I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley, if you look at the US, you have tons of world-class companies there. But then again, you look at Silicon Valley, it is one of the most thriving, most innovative startup ecosystem on this planet. Yeah, so I mean, the argument that just because you have bigger players in town doesn't mean that startups have no chance to survive. Obviously, you see a lot of other ecosystems, like for example, the one in Korea, where you have a lot of conglomerates controlling the economy. Like, but it's basically controlled by a few brands: Samsung, LG,
Samsung, right?
The family businesses. I mean, so obviously there's a way to deal with that. In the case of Korea, they have government programs that are actually more helpful to the startups. They're trying to encourage more young people to come out and not just stick to the old job, not just to corporate jobs, because there's a traditional way of thinking that, hey, when I graduate, I need to work for a big corporate because that's how my mom and dad have done. My older people around me have done. So I think the biggest issue is not in terms of, hey, the bigger players, so they're gonna eat into my market. No, it's not that. It's about the talents, their mindset. Are they more willing to do something very different and more problem solving? They want to create something out of nothing, and then so they'll be attracted to work for a startup or even create their own startup. Or are they more wanting a more stable life, a more stable lifestyle, and so work for a big corporate? And so how do you strike a good balance? Because all these big companies, obviously, they're doing well, they're feeding the families, a lot of families, they're helping the economy, building the economies, and so they have their place. But for startups, they also have their place. Big corporates are known to be slow in trying to, you'll be surprised, they're slow in adopting new ways of doing things. At least they're not as agile, because compared to startups, if something doesn't work this week, I can always change it so that it will be something different next week, right? So this is how startups can thrive, because big companies can't possibly do everything just because they have more resources, have more people. Most of the people are not startup people. They're not entrepreneurial. Okay, some of them are changing, right? A lot of big organizations, have already starting to change their culture, and so that they will allow more people to be entrepreneurial, meaning that they allow more people to make mistakes. But that is still far away from what the startup environment can allow. A startup environment is all about a lot of trial and errors, finding out the best way to do one thing. So every week you can see something different, new changes. Big corporates, they can't do that, right? So they are slow in a sense. So this gives the startups a lot of opportunities to actually become ahead of what the big players are supposed to be doing. So just because you have Google, you have Facebook, doesn't mean that they can do everything, right?
Right. So thank you very much for the both of you sharing such an amazing insights on our topic today. So I think we are reaching the time now that is the Q&A time, that I think we have a few questions from the audience as well. Let's have one of them. It's actually, what do you think is the government's role in the startup ecosystem, be it national or local government? I think that's what they mean by federal government and state government. I mean, David actually answered in typing, but maybe you want to share it out here that everyone can hear out.
Yeah, Jeffrey, you want to take on this?
Oh, you typed out something I didn't know.
just in case we don't have enough time, or I just
right. Thank you, Stephen, for the question. I think I've said it as well that government should, well, actually not just I said it, but David said it as well. So for my part, government, because, well, I don't know, it's difficult to just tackle this issue with just one answer because sometimes the process involves not just having the right process, but it involves like having the right people with the right experience, at the helm, and then directing how the direction should be. And then for the national government, obviously it needs to take care of what the national interest as a whole. But then for every local government, like in the case of Malaysia, you have 13 states, and then you also have all those different cities. So all of them will have different interests they need to take care of. And so for all of them, they need to build certain things that are specific to their own ecosystem. And so you almost always have to have the right people that understand that ecosystem, and then at the same time understand the entrepreneurial need of the ecosystem, and then go out there to talk to the right people, not just within the country but outside of the country, and then come up with a solution that actually is specific to your local government. So 13 states in Malaysia, we can talk about 13 different ways of doing the same thing, like people, for the local government there. And so, but I think having the right people is definitely the good start. If you don't have the right people, but at least open yourself up to a lot of consultation process, because just because you're the government doesn't mean that you know best. Startup world, changes everywhere. Every day is different. Today is different from yesterday. Tomorrow is different from today. There's so many things happening, and so how can you quickly adapt to the requirements, to the needs of the startup ecosystem? And so it requires constant, continuous consultation process to go on. I think that's something that I'll emphasize. Over to you, David.
Yeah, so if we're looking at government's role in terms of local, basically we will mean city level or provincial levels, and federal meaning the at the premier or the president level. So I think one of the things that these governments needs to sit down and talk about boundary. In the corporate world or the existing legislature structures is very clear. But when we're dealing with digital economies, let's say you're looking at Uber. Is it is it fall under the Ministry of Transportation, or is it fall under the Ministry of something, right? So I think the border of the existing governance become very vague when it comes to digital economy play. So federal and digital and local need to sit down and really look at their existing, what are the new boundaries and what are the new role and the responsibility. They need to first define that playbook. And one thing I love about Taiwan or most Asian is there's the concept of legal, illegal, and not illegal, right? So a lot of time I always, I have clients at different level. I always said, if you are willing to take a little step, talk about not illegal, and then we identify what that boundary is for the new economy, for local and federal, then we have that little room for the ecosystem building and startup come in and give their thoughts. That's number one, define that big. And the second one is set up a framework. You see right now, especially in Taiwan, a lot of at the mayor level or the premier level, they all have their official consultation group, which are the ecosystem builders or which are the ecosystem, service provider, helping them to draft that bills, right? So I would say, I work with, mayors in Japan and mayor in Taiwan and other places. They have these, regular meetings and really look at this, So the third thing is having that conversation, with the ecosystem builder. So if you do these three things, I think you are at a very good start.
Thank you, David and Jeffrey. So next question is, how does one country's ecosystem work with another country's ecosystem?
Okay, I would take on that. I think I'm very blessed with the success of the Fukuoka projects. right now we are being invited at the mayor level and also at the federal level. So what the trend we see is local governments, or let's say you're the government of Taiwan, reach out to the ecosystem builder of other ecosystems, bring them as your advisors. Not only you will get the, a comparable data sets, also you're building that trusted working relationship. So your new policy is not only building on your research data, but also building on the data sets of the other country. And your policy will be more inclusive, will build a foundation for other. So right now, actually, ecosystem builder have another role, is actually being the ambassador of these new initiative of the cross-border collaboration. So that's why now governments work with the ecosystem ever. It's a completely different way of engaging to what we used to do when we're seeing the big corporate being built up. So some even claim, I know this is getting touchy, the ecosystem builder is actually a new role of lobbying, but with a good mindset. Not saying lobbying is not a good mindset, but you're actually doing lobbying for creating a framework for the digital economy. So when I hear the word lobbying in terms of ecosystem builder, I was not feeling easy at that time. But if you really think about it, yes, you are try to build and support a new economy, a new framework. So that would probably the suggestion. So if you're government, reach out to the ecosystem builder of the other ecosystem. And if you're ecosystem builder, try to participate in the great, startup grind initiatives, being saying, do your data set, do your, framework or theories, and then being invited to, conferences or, invitation by other governments. That's how you get it started.
Well, I can't go to conferences now.
Virtual conference.
Yeah, attend virtual conferences. Obviously, I think I agree with what David said. I also would like to add that just because that the question is I don't know whether it's coming from the perspective of hey, can the two governments work together? For me, it's not just the collaboration shouldn't be just at state stop at the government level. I think at the private sector level, there's a lot of interaction that can take place, and so maybe government can actually use certain policies to encourage that to happen. So it doesn't have to be like, hey, I need to go out as a government. I need to go reach out to the other ecosystem before anything can happen. I think the government can actually encourage it, right? It can encourage people to come. It can encourage your own people to go. Okay, so there should be a two-way traffic. This is how we can. The thing about going and coming, it's about learning from one another and then working together with one another, and eventually, hopefully, 1+1, is greater than 2, right? That's the ultimate outcome you want to achieve. So it doesn't always have to be the government doing certain things, so that like, hey, this is oftentimes I think. And if you look at, I always like to look at Silicon Valley because they provide stack contracts. You look at the government there, they don't really do as much, for Silicon Valley, to some extent, right? You don't really hear about, hey, the city government of the city government of San Francisco doing a lot of stuff for the startup for Silicon Valley. Not really the case. But in a lot of other Asian countries, for some reason, you have a lot of government taking the lead in doing a lot of stuff for the ecosystem. I'm not saying that's right and wrong. Sometimes you do need the government to intervene to some extent. But then again, you have to realize that not everything has to be planned. There's always the organic part, which is the beauty of it, because it's an ecosystem. It's supposed to be organic. So what you need to do as a government is to try to create that environment, not just for your own ecosystem, but also for a lot of different neighbor ecosystem to come and interact. I think that's something that will be much better, in terms of ultimate outcome.
Right. Okay. Now we have 2 more questions actually. So let's address them. One of them is actually, what is the key altitude when it comes to face policy issue as a startup ecosystem builder? Do we need to step out for the first shot, or just stand a support site for startup or government side?
I don't really understand. Can you like elaborate a bit? What do you mean by that?
No, this is a question from one of the audience actually. What is the
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm actually asking questions actually not from my side or for the fireside chat, but the question is actually from the audience actually. So this question is, what is the key altitude when it comes to facing policy issues as a startup ecosystem builder? And then do we need to step out for the first shot, or just stand a support site for startups or government side?
I would take on this. I definitely made a lot of mistakes, so I will speak from my mistakes. Okay, it's very natural, you know. It's like when you're a baby. When you're hungry, what do? You cry, you know. When you're at elementary, when you don't like something, what do? You throw rocks at them, right? But when it comes to governments, you know, the first thing that you do, the first thing you want to do, which is the last thing you want to do, is be on the blacklist. So don't throw rocks at anybody, you know. But it doesn't mean that you cannot disagree. But doing in a silver manner that you strive a conversation. I see a lot of things, or a lot of mistake I did is, when I didn't like a policy, I just go rant on Facebook. Basically, you're ended the possibility of people reaching out to you, have that conversation. So I think in the last 3-4 years, what I learned is, you know, embrace the effort of the current government or the current policies, and then be very precise and accurate in describing the action item or the takeaway of these learning, and then entertain the possibility of having that mutual trusted conversation. I think that's number one. So a lot of people reaching out to me, I said, first, clean up your Facebook, right? Or clean up your Twitter. That's the first thing you do. And the second is, do you wait? No, be invited, you know? And I think sometimes being invited is not being non-proactive. Actually, being invited is a very proactive way of doing it, because you need to build something that people want. You need to be some kind of position yourself as a researcher or expert on this subject matter. It could be O2O platform, it could be digital health, it could be blockchain. So pick a niche that you want to build your credential on it and be invited. And the number 3 step is, you actually want to be within the change. So identify who are the potential upcoming policymakers. Maybe they are junior, they just came out. Maybe they're in the semi government. Maybe they haven't raised their hand. But extend your network. You will know who want to do something. Maybe they're just waiting for you to work together. So I have few success to work on policy in Taiwan and Japan with policy maker that I never thought I would have a conversation. So identify who they are, be invited, work under the radar. Sometimes just don't. One thing the government are more fragile and vulnerable is to have a draft of the bill being released before it's even. So confidentiality, trust is very important when you're at that step 3. Jeffrey?
I hope I understand the question correctly, but I think that government is definitely a player that you need to talk to a lot, because most of them don't really understand where the ecosystem player, the builders are coming from, and it's just a case of ignorance, not because that they most of them would like to do things certain ways. Obviously, they would. The other thing is that most of them, they have, if you put yourself in their shoes, because when they look at startups and they look at the SMEs in the economy, SMEs are actually the majority. Startups, by any standard, in every country, they are always the small, pocket of the entire population. So they are not they are probably not on their mind all that often. So how do you actually attract their attention? How do you actually convince them to divert some of the resources your way and then do stuff for you, whether it's at executive level or at the legislative level. And so it requires a lot of obviously you need to convince them. You need to constantly talk to them. It's a lot of educational process for sure. I think David been through a lot. I'm somewhat fortunate, the fortunate ones. I don't have to go through a whole lot of that process, but I did work for a government-sponsored program, so we do understand that hey, government do things certain way doesn't mean that they are bad people, right? You just have to keep talking to them, keep the dialogue open, keep the channel open, and then let them know that hey, I'm here for you. It's not just you give me what I need, but tell me what you need. This is a partnership, right? Government and private sector there should be a partnership. There should be a lot of partnership actually. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just want to add. I think Jeffrey, definitely touched on a great point. Over conversation, view that as a partner. Just I'm not sure if people just wondering how long that partnership or that initial investment takes. So for any policy that I have worked on, try to expect 3 to 5 years. We're looking at, let's say if you want to work on something like legalize Uber in your country at that level, 3 to 5 years of time frame is very easy. So the mistake that I made is I thought that was going to happen overnight in 6 months. No, it's a 3 to 5, and government changes too. So whatever you work on could no longer be on the platform. So do expect that. So patience, having conversation, be friends with a lot of people, build credentials, and have confidence in your government and your ecosystem. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for the both of you. Last question. In business model canvas, right? There are 9 building blocks of what makes up a business. Okay. What about a mature startup ecosystem? What are the building blocks to becoming one? This is the last question from one of the audience.
Wow.
So
you want to take on that one?
That's not an easy question to answer because we're still finding out. I must say there is not really the right formula for every situation. You almost, like I've already mentioned earlier, that you almost always have to figure it out along the way. You have to apply and adapt. It's not copy and paste. And so I think if you're really treating, I think that is great. That's a great point to make because even with business model canvas, you apply to different scenario, you come up with different business model, right? And one element change will cause a business model to look radically different. And so I think that it's in the same mindset. If you really look at the government or the ecosystem itself as a business, obviously you need to find the right elements to make it work. The ecosystem, the thing about different ecosystem is that there are certain things that are already set. You cannot really change it because to change it, it will require too much effort. So you just have to live with it, or or work around it, or work on it, or maybe make that into your biggest advantage. There's so many examples out there. I don't want to, because in the interest of time, I will not try to figure out too many examples. But yeah, I think it's a great way to really see your ecosystem from the lens of like, hey, this is business model canvas, all the 9 different elements. So what do I have and what do I not have? And then once you identify what you have and what you don't have, then design something, the right mix that works for your ecosystem.
Yeah, I have Jeffrey talks an amazing point. That probably require another 3 sessions if people want to do that. So lately there's actually initiative about policy hack, using policy canvas in looking at that as well. So when we're talking about policy, we're kind of bringing the government in, but of course, I think Jeffrey reminded me earlier, everybody, that ecosystem is not just, you could be the corporate, it could be other, right? So if you're really looking at the mature ecosystem, what you're really looking into is how do you jump 10x, right? So if you think Silicon Valley is a mature ecosystem compared to other, well, they are basically doing at the humanity level, true? They are trying to build the infrastructure beyond US, right? So you have crazy people looking at, you have crazy, a company like Facebook trying to launch a global currency. You have SpaceX trying to launch the first, private space shuttle to Mars. It's actually, they are actually, a mature ecosystem is actually setting a new set of playbook for multi-government addressing humanitarian needs or problem. And then the common things along that is actually talent. So does your mature ecosystem support the inbounding of amazing talent to your physical ecosystem or virtual to work on things that are going to jump you 10x? And if you are able to do that, then definitely government come with the immigration, entrepreneur, corporate are looking at tax saving because they're doing a lot of research. There's going to be a framework of open innovation. How do you address espionage? And you see people are looking at more fine scenarios, at the more maturity. And then, I'm just very excited to see how they're going to work on, because they definitely tackle on things that I can't even imagine.
All right, so thank you very much for the amazing sharing and sharing insights from the both of you, David all the way from Taiwan and Jeffrey all the way from New Zealand. Once again, really appreciate your time spending 1 hour with us.